guys, welcome back. So we completed our mushroom models in the last few videos. In this video onwards we'll be continuing the modeling, and this time we'll focus on that main plant you can see in the behind. So we will start with the stem, and what you can do is we'll be creating the model using a curve. So first we will actually create a curve. You can go to the curve menu, and here you can select that EP curve tool. Once you selected that, in the front view itself, you can actually start from the base, and we'll just create a rough stem based on our concept like that. So once you created that curve itself, now you can actually edit that curve by editing its points. So you can see the curve in the perspective view also. We'll just move it back the original, and here as you can see now it's actually touching our rest of the models. So here actually we can edit the points in order to make it much more properly aligned and all. So here itself we can select the curve itself, and you can just select right click, and you can select control vertex. So once you do that, you can see all the points on the curve will be highlighted, and in the front view also you can see them. And if you are not able to see them properly, you can in the perspective view itself you can press 4 on the keyboard, and now you can actually see them much more clearly. So for now I'll just enable the shaded view itself, so we'll be able to see it much more clearly if it's touching that original or not. So once that is done, you can actually just drag and select each point, and you can just move them, and you can edit them. And if you are not able to see a particular point, you can just make a big selection, and while selecting it, definitely one point will be selected, and by that you can actually edit each of the point, and you will be able to edit them. So I'll just continue selecting the points and edit them, so it will not be touching our main model or anything like that. Once everything is selected and aligned properly, then we will just move on to the next part of our modeling process. Okay, so once that is done, we can actually use this curve to create the stem in two different ways. I'm going to show you both of them. So what I'll do is I'll just select that curve model, and I'll just make a duplicate by pressing Ctrl D and move it outside, so it will be much more properly visible. So now we have a curve model, and the first option is to use the extrude option in order to create the model, in order to create a stem. So what you can do is you can actually go to poly modeling, and you can create a cylinder at the start of the curve, that is the start part of the curve, and you can make a really small cylinder like this, and you can just align it based on our curve, and you can just align it like this. Once that is done, we'll just reduce it to maybe 8, subdivision axis to 8, something like that, and we'll just select all the top faces of our cylinder, and we will just shift to select the curve itself. So first we actually created a cylinder, and we selected only the top faces, and we'll just press shift extrude option, and you can see once you enable the extrude option, the model is actually, the faces is actually extruded till the end of the curve, and currently it's actually not following the curve itself. So now you can see in the extrude options, you can see an option called subdivisions. Now we don't have enough subdivision so that the model will be able to follow the curve. So once you started adding subdivisions, you can see that model is actually started to align with that curve itself. Once you added enough subdivisions, you can see the model is actually aligned with that curve model itself, and now we have a final stump. Once that is done, you can just press 3 on the keyboard. Now you have a perfectly created model. So this is one way. The second way is, second option is to create a cylinder again. This time we'll just create a full length cylinder, same as our curve, and again we'll just reduce the subdivision axis to 8. And this time what we will do is we'll just add a subdivision axis here itself. We will add maybe something around 8 subdivisions. Now we are going to select the cylinder as well as the curve, and we'll go to deform, and here we have an option called curve wrap. So this option is actually for this particular thing only. So you can actually create a particular curve and you will be able to wrap a different model on that curve itself. So now we actually selected that, and once I enable this option, you can see that model is actually aligned perfectly with the curve itself. So these are two different method of doing it. And after that you enable that option, you can go to curve wrap settings in the attribute editor itself, and you can actually see the difference how it's actually being aligned. That envelope option, if it's in 100%, that means the value is 1, the maximum value is 1, and if you move it to 100%, you can see the model is actually completely aligned with the curve itself. And the second one is offset. You can actually move that particular model along the curve, so you can actually animate them also. So this is one of the benefit of using curve wrap option, and you can actually move and align it properly. And the third one is sampling accuracy. That means actually it will start aligning that edge loops properly, so it will have a much more perfect output. And in between you can actually edit the mesh scaling also. You can actually extend that length of that model, so it will actually perfectly align with the model. And actually after that you can actually adjust the radius of that particular model you want. And finally you have a scale curve. Here you can adjust the top and bottom of the curve. If you want that any part of that shape to be tapered or something like that, if you want to make a grass kind of model, and you can actually taper the top or bottom based on how you want that. For now we will just I'll just demonstrate. You can actually make the bottom area much more thicker, and gradually it will become more thinner, something like that. You can adjust the curve and you will have a much more organic and realistic looking output. So this is one way of doing it. And once that is done, you can actually always go back to our channel box, and in the poly cylinder settings you can actually add subdivisions and make it much more smoother, or you can actually reduce the number of subdivisions based on your preference. For now we'll just add it 10 subdivisions. Once that is done, if you try to move that particular model now, you can see it's actually not, you are actually not able to move the model. That means it's actually still connected to the curve itself. So if you want to move that object, you have to move the curve itself, then only you will be able to move the model. But if you want to cut that connection between the curve and the model, what you can do is you can just drag and select both the model and as well as the curve, or you can just select the model itself. Then you can go to the edit menu and you can go to delete by type, and you can press history. That means once you deleted the history, there is the connection between that curve and the model is actually deleted, and now you can move the model much more freely, and you can position it anywhere you want. But one problem is once you actually deleted that history, now you will not be able to control the model by editing that curve points. So that is the only thing you have to keep in mind. So now we will actually align and position it on our model, and we'll just delete these curves, and we'll just align and move and align this model properly. Okay, and I'll do the same thing as before. I'll just delete the unwanted faces. Okay, so that is our plant stem, and you can see it's actually not touching any of the earlier created models. So it's actually perfectly aligned and everything is properly aligned. So once that is done, the next part is we have to create the leaves for the plant. So before that, I'll just add a few more details in here. So I'll just add one more edge loop here, and I'll just scale the top. So we will have an area for the leaves to be connected, something like that. So like that, and I'll just add one more edge loop closer to that earlierly added one, so the detail will be preserved much more properly. And here for this edge loop, I'll just add bevel edges, so it's actually looking much more properly. So the stem is completed. The next thing is we have to create the leaves. So for the leaves part, we are actually not going to create the exact leaves here itself. We are just going to add some plain sheets, and while texturing we will add some alpha channel, and we'll just crop out the empty area, and we will create the leaves texturing in Photoshop or any other program itself. For now, we are actually going to focus on just creating that base for the leaves by creating some planes. Okay. So again, we'll go to the poly modeling tab, and here you can see something called polyplane. We'll just select the polyplane, and here we'll go to the top view, and we'll just create a plane like this. Once that is done, you can move that plane, and if you feel I feel it's little small, so I'll just scale that top area so it will have a little bit. So we'll just move and align the plane, and once that is done, you can actually select the edges, and you can just move it down slightly and move it inside a little bit like that. So now we will just select the edge loop tool, and we'll add two more edge loops, and we will just align them like that. So once that is done, you can actually rotate and move them, and while texturing we will be adding the details on this plane, and all the empty space will not be visible on the final model. Only the properly textured area will be visible, and everything else will be transparent. So this is one of our leaf, and the next thing is I'm going to move this particular move tool location. Now it's actually aligned in the center of the plane itself, so we want to move it till to the end of the leaves, so we'll be able to easily rotate and align everything properly. So to do that, you can actually go to the top view itself. You can press D on the keyboard. You can see once you selected D, press D on the keyboard, the tool itself is changing. Now you can actually move that location of the tool, and you can actually align them anywhere you want. So I'm going to align it the end of or leaf model. And once that is done, now we can actually start creating the second model. So what I'll do is I'll just press Ctrl D on the keyboard. Now I'll just rotate, enable the rotate tool, and I'll just rotate it and align the second leaf. So I will continue the same thing. Okay, now we actually have 4 leaves, and for the final one I'll just duplicate one more time. Okay, so now we actually added 5 planes, and when we actually completely texture that model, it will be looking much more different, and everything will be looking really nice. And you can edit each of these edges, and you can align them however you want. You can actually do that even after texturing also, so we don't have to worry about that now. So that is our planned model also completed. So the next thing is we have to add the rest of the details for our model. So we will continue the same process in order to create the rest of the details for our final model. So I'll see you guys in the next video.